generally speaking, if you look up market and you have like a very small addressable market of large businesses, I think that's probably an area where you might want to bring in a BDR. You're going to be really, really targeted about that outreach. You're probably also going to be in the field, meeting people in person. But on the opposite end, in the mid-market and even SMB, where there's a higher volume of activity happening and perhaps you have more deal flow, I think this is a really great place for AI to kind of help and augment the existing sales team. And so, pretty simple. If you're super enterprise and you have a very small book of business, go grab a BDR. If you're mid-market or SMB and you have a higher volume of activity happening, I think this is a place where AI can really help today. Hey everybody, Michael here. This episode is going to be a little bit different. We've had a bunch of folks reaching out, DMing, asking questions. And so I wanted to sit down today and answer a lot of these questions and kind of share some of my thoughts on them. I do a lot of the asking, but I don't do as much of the sharing. And so today's episode is really going to be kind of a sit down where I go through a lot of the hot button topics that folks have been asking me about. So without further ado, let's jump in. All right. So the first question. I have 4 reps. They mostly field inbound leads, but we're trying to build more pipeline. Should I hire a BDR or leverage AI to get my reps to build more pipeline? This is an interesting question. Of course, there's like a lot of nuance that I would want to know before answering this. But generally speaking, I think if you look up market and you have like a very small addressable market of large businesses, I think that's probably an area where you might want to bring in a BDR. You're going to be really, really targeted about that outreach. You're probably also going to be in the field, meeting people in person. But on the opposite end, in the mid-market and even SMB, where there's a higher volume of activity happening and perhaps you have more deal flow, I think this is a really great place for AI to kind of help and augment the existing sales team. The reality is, if you're a startup and you have like 4 reps, there's probably some pretty limited bandwidth, especially in a scenario like this where it sounds like most of the pipeline is coming inbound. But if you have your leads prioritized and you have a real reason to reach out, intent signals, hot button topic right now, but really having a specific reason to reach out to folks that aren't coming inbound, that could be a really good use of, let's say, an hour or 2 of that account executive's day. And so, pretty simple. If you're super enterprise and you have a very small book of business, go grab a BDR. If you're mid-market or SMB and you have a higher volume of activity happening, I think this is a place where AI can really help today. All right, let's look at question 2. So we use an intent signal platform to identify people who might be interested in our product, but we're having a hard time getting our reps to leverage the data and take action on it. What do you recommend? So this is actually something that's really common that we're hearing in the market today. You've got a bunch of these intent signals and you can track a ton of different things, right? You can track folks that are hitting your website. You can track what's happening on LinkedIn. You can track social listening on Reddit. There's really like a significant number of signals that you can look at and identify. The challenge and the problem is when you start to pump all of these signals into Slack or into your CRM, it becomes a ton of noise. And not all of that is typically relevant to folks in the outreach that they want to do. And so what ends up happening is analysis paralysis. And this is a really difficult problem because you've just invested in this brand new tool. And the hope is that it's going to help you uncover some low-hanging fruit. But when in reality, from an execution standpoint, it's actually creating more confusion and more challenge. And so the recommendation there is twofold. One of them is you have to get super tight on the filtering that you do, right? Like there's nothing worse than creating a ton of noise and then your reps actually choose not to look at it. They just drown out the noise. And so you want to get really specific around the filtering that you do for your ICP to make sure that the only signals that come in are actually going to be at least relevant accounts and leads and connected to a relevant accounts and leads. And the second piece is creating a real process around how to action off of it. This could be a combination of cold calling, emailing, LinkedIn, but having a strategy of how you're going to action that data is incredibly important. And so I'd say if you are thinking about intent signals, make sure that you have an action plan that you have ready to roll so that when you bring in those signals, they're not just sitting there creating noise for your company. Okay. Third question. Is email a viable pipeline channel? This is a hot button topic on LinkedIn, and I think it's been a hot button topic for years, but a lot has changed over the last several months. So of course you've got the introduction of AISDRs, right, which are more or less blasting emails to people that are AI personalized. A lot of them are clickbaity. Um, you also have the introduction of email deliverability warm up tools, which are helping businesses send out mass emails and actually get into the inbox. And so, from a buyer perspective, there's more emails in the inbox than ever before. The reality is the quality of them has actually gone down, even from like general sequences, which are not personalized at all. And so, it's really impacting sellers' abilities to book meetings and pipeline over email. And so, I guess the way that I would look at email is really as an awareness channel. And I think if you change your mindset to email being an awareness channel, it becomes pretty clear what the strategy should look like there, which is you should be creating value. And if you're not creating value with your emails and you're looking to just clickbait people into opening it or replying to it, I think you're missing the point. Um, with that in mind, right, that would be like cold email outreach. There's also warm email outreach, right? Which is when you find a really key indication that someone might be interested in meeting with you or might be interested in learning more about your product. And so, if you have a really clear reason to reach out and there's been some type of relatively clear indication that that person is interested in what you're doing or the product that you're selling, I think that's where sales emails and email as a whole can really help generate pipeline. But if you're, kind of building a list and you have an ideal customer profile, but no real reason to reach out or no real indication that they're interested in you, think of email as an awareness channel and treat it as an awareness channel where instead of trying to sell, or pitch, try to create some value and try to figure out a way that you can add value to that business. So we've got question 4. How should I be leveraging LinkedIn to build pipeline? LinkedIn has become, I'd say, in the last 6 to 9 months, probably the most important channel for startups. It's all about getting your message out there, getting people to see and understand what you do, and getting people to find you and discover you. The first piece of LinkedIn is like generate content. It doesn't have to be amazing. Just get your voice out there and start to share what you're working on, start to share how it's impacting the businesses that you're working with. And what you'll see is like people start to engage and you start to identify patterns of the types of people that are engaging with you. The way that we treat this at First Touch is like, great. We have a bunch of people engaging with us, whether it be on my page or Jared's page or our company page or Amanda's page. And we start to look at all of that traffic. And once people engage, let's say a certain number of times, that could be a good indication that maybe they'd be open to chatting with us. And so you don't need to send some crazy message to them, but you could just say simply like, hey, I saw that you've been engaging with a bunch of my posts. Like, is this something that you're thinking about? And just start the conversation that way. So 2 pieces here. One is create content, but really track your engagement, people that are viewing your profile, people that are engaging with your posts, and start to identify trends of like, if people are engaging multiple times, it's possible that what you're talking about is actually really relevant to them. And this has been a huge pipeline generator for First Touch. And even outside of just pipeline generation, it's been a really great way to build actual relationships. And a lot of those relationships have turned into folks that are now using our platform or are at least interested potentially in the future. Okay. Question 5. How do you engage with de-anonymized website visitors? Well, first, let's start like, what is a de-anonymized website visitor, right? I think everyone's pretty familiar with the fact that if you're using HubSpot, you can see when your account might be on your website. De-anonymized website visitors is a little bit of a newer concept. And basically, the idea is that when someone comes to your website and they don't fill out a form or they don't identify themselves, you can actually see about 30% of that traffic and identify the individual that's actually visited your site rather than just the account. This is a tricky one because it's pretty creepy to just tell someone, "Hey, I saw you were on my site," when they didn't identify themselves. And so I think the best way to handle de-anonymized web traffic is to go out and engage with those folks on LinkedIn. Simply add them as a connection. Um, and if they accept that connection, great. If they don't, it's a pretty clear indication that maybe they don't, want to engage with you. But if they accept the connection, then they start to see the content that you're putting out. And based on the last question that, was asked and that we just chatted through, that's when you can really start to use that information to engage. So the way that we look at it is like a little bit of a less aggressive approach and a little bit more of like a process of engagement. But it's really about like understanding who's visiting the website. Is the ICP on, or do we need to change and tweak our messaging? And then once they've hit our website, can we get them to engage in our social funnel, which then could potentially turn into a relationship from there? All right. Question 6. What channels are working best to build pipeline right now for you guys? You know, actually, I get this question a lot, especially when we're in conversations with folks. I don't think that there's like one silver bullet channel. And just in general, I don't think there's really any silver bullets in sales. I think doing the things that don't scale, but having a process around it is a really good way to think about it. Um, all of these channels should work cohesively. Ideally, it's an easy thing to say. It's a lot harder to execute on. But we talked about this a little bit earlier. Email channel is really great for awareness, right? This is where potentially you could add some value and maybe that person checks out the website because they're interested in what you've shared with them. And now that they've hit the website, you're de-anonymizing the web traffic and you're engaging with them on LinkedIn. And then they're seeing your LinkedIn content and they're starting to see you across these different channels and become more and more aware. And once they hit that certain level of engagement, that's where I think you can start to reach out. We call that like warm outbound, warm outreach. And so the way that we think about channels is channel orchestration. And this is a concept that I think, especially for larger businesses, is really difficult, right? Because it's kind of just like hit them on email, hit them with a cold call, hit them with LinkedIn, and it's built out in this very predefined sequence. The way that we look at that is not by like a series of steps that you take, but rather reacting in real time to the things that are happening and creating an engagement journey across those channels. So again, LinkedIn, email, website visitors, cold calling, or warm calling should all be used together, but really in an orchestrated way that's based off of engagement rather than just a predefined list of tasks that you should accomplish. Cool. Well, that wraps up the questions that we have for today. I'll just say this, like, thank you all so much for listening to the pod. We've had a really great month so far. Was not expecting to get this many DMs, questions, and folks reaching out. And so thank you all for listening. Like, it really means a ton. And always feel free to reach out and connect with me. Happy to answer questions like this. I'll answer, of course, in the DMs. Maybe if you have a question that a bunch of folks are asking, I'll throw it up here in a pod when we do this again in about a month. But I just want to thank you all. Really appreciate it. And I hope this was helpful.